So one of the first things we want to do is, of course, start our pattern, and then we're gonna come back to our instructions. So let's start. I'm gonna start our smallest piece first. And I like to use the same amount of starch, remember, on our projects throughout the entire quilt. I like to be a pretty heavy starcher. Basically, get it pretty much wet. And then you're going to just wiggle your iron around and get it completely dry. So we're going to continue to do that on all of the fabric included in this kit. Now it's time to cut our fabric. It doesn't matter which of the fabrics you cut first, you just need to cut all of them. I am gonna grab my aqua check first. So I'm gonna cut one 3.5 by 2.5 inch rectangle and one 6.5 inch by 1.5 inch rectangle. So I'm first gonna just take a look at the width of my piece. It is 5 inches, so that means I can get my 3.5 inch width. I wanna get my biggest width. So what I'm gonna do first is give myself, when you press your fabric, right, like it gets a little wonky. So what I'm gonna do is make a straight line with my gingham. So if you can see, I'm lining up the edge of my ruler perfectly with my gingham. And take my trash to the side. Now I'm gonna turn this and I am going to put it, we are doing a 3.5 inch by 2.5 inch. So I'm getting my 3.5 inch this way. So I will do my 2.5 inch this way. So I'm going over to 2.5 inches. And so the line that I'm using to line my fabric up is the left. The top and bottom are not cut square yet. And we are going to line this right up. And if you wiggle your fabric, just get it back into place and you'll make sure that the lines on your ruler line up with your grid on top. And then you know you have your ruler perfectly straight. And you can see I just wiggled my fabric a little, but it's okay. And we're gonna do that cut. Now we are going to do our 3.5 inch. So again, I'm going to just square my line. I get my ruler where I can see it a little better. So if you line up right here, your lines on the top and bottom should line up because of those are the two we've already cut. Cut my end off, and now I can do my 3.5 inch line. So 1, 2, 3.5, and there we go. So the checkerboard, the gingham, one piece is cut. My next piece, remember I still have a nice squared line down here. Was that the end? Let's cut another line. Oh no, it's this line. And we are going to 1.5 by 6.5. So obviously I know I don't have 6.5 inch this way. I'm gonna go this way. So we're gonna line this up and go 6 over. So that will be on this where I have it positioned. It'll be at my 10.5 line. And again, make sure you get your ruler where your lines on your ruler match the lines on your cutting mat, and that way you know you're perfectly square. So 6.5, and then we need a 1.5. So you have tons of fabric, of course, left over. And what we're gonna do is just go right over to the edge here. And so my lines line up at the top and bottom. That means I know I'm making a nice straight line. And then flip for my 1.5. You can also use the lines on your ruler. I would kind of pick one or the other. I'm using my ruler as my lines. So then 1.5. All right, so I have my gingham cut. Again, you have tons of fabric left over and you have your pieces that you need set aside. Now we'll cut our white with green Swiss dots. We're gonna cut two that are 3.5 inch squares. Super easy. I'm just gonna cut one line at the end And then we will go 3.5 and 3.5. And so my fabric, of course, will be squared up. So 3.5 would be at my 6.5 line. Oop, moved my fabric. Oop. And there we go. Make sure all your lines are straight. So 1, 2, 3.5. And then I can leave this in place and go, oops, I turned my light pad on. So I go half and then 1, 2, 3. So I'm gonna go over here to my 10-inch line. And cut right here. So again, you have lots of scraps every month. Hope you've been keeping them nice and happy. So now I'm just gonna line up the top and bottom because these are nice, clean lines. We are gonna put this top and bottom line where they line up nicely. We're gonna give ourselves a nice clean line right here. And then we're gonna measure to our 3.5 inches. So flip this and I will go to my 9.5 inch line like so. There we go. So now I have pieces B and D. Now we're gonna do our white. So the white has a lot of cutting. Let's take a look at the width of our fabric. It is 10 inches approximately. So I know that I can get my 8.5s. So what I'm gonna do for ease of the video and staying in the camera shot, I am going to fold my fabric in half. There we go. I'm lining up the selvage. There we go. And I'm going to do a nice straight line. I'm going to put my fold on the line. And then we're going to cut that selvage off. And our first width is, let's get our pattern back into view, 8.5 by 3.5. So I'm going to then flip this and do our 3.5. So I'm using the top fold and my left right here because these I know are square. And I'm gonna then do my 3.5. When in doubt, double check your measurements. I say my measurements out loud a lot when I'm cutting. Make sure this is nice and square everywhere. And then now we can do our 8.5, which would be 4.25. There we go. And there we go. So now we have piece A. We can set that aside. Now I'm gonna go on and do my next 8.5 cut. Because I already have it folded in half, it's nice, easy for me. So that is 8.5 by 6.5. So let's put this back in place. And we are gonna go to the 6.5 inch mark. There we go. Using a bit of a longer ruler than I must say I normally would, but it's working. And then the same thing, to get my 8.5, we're gonna turn this line up. So I have this line, my left and my top, I know are lined up perfectly. And because 8.5 and a half is 4.25, I will go over 4.25. There we go. So now I have piece H. So now I just have a 6.5 by 3.5 and a 6.5 by 4.5. So I'm gonna do my 3.5 and 4.5. So let's line this little guy up. And yes, your fabric might be like a little wonky from starching and things like that. Don't you worry, you have plenty. So I'm doing my 3.5. And now I'm gonna do my 4.5. So if I leave it in place, that will take me down to the 8. And I just wanna double check, 4.5, yep. So half and then 4. And now I need my 6.5, which in half is 3 1/4. So I can lay these right on top of each other. I am lining up the bottom cut line in my side fold. And I am going to go to 3 1/4 because that is 6.5 and half. So right here. And of course you can cut using any method you want to. Do not think that this is the only way to cut because it definitely isn't. And again, you have tons of fabric left over. So now what you will do are take all of your pieces, you'll take them, and we are going to organize them just like so. So we have piece A, and then we have unit B is going to be very easy to lay out because it's our unit 2, excuse me. We have that, this, right? We're using, this is B, C, and D are gonna make a unit. Now we have G and H. So we have this little big guy, and then H is another piece of white. Now this is our applique, and this is our, the background of our stitching. And then we have our checkered and our final piece F. So let's sew these together over at the sewing machine. Okay, so now you have your block assembled. I'm gonna take out my pins. I do use pins when I'm putting together something that has a lot of seams. When I piece some of the units, I don't necessarily use pins. But now we are going to set our seam here. And we are gonna press our seam towards, there we go. We are gonna press it towards this side right here. It's gonna naturally wanna go that way. There we go. Let's give it a press. And now what we're gonna do is cut our design, our pre-printed design, and we're gonna put it in place. If you want on this seam, by the way, you could also press it open to eliminate some bulk. You can press any of the seams open that you like. I'm a pretty big fan of pressing seams open, so I'm gonna do that right here. And again, you can do however you like. There are times when we're having you marry the seams throughout the quilt, but right here, none of these seams actually marry and line up exactly. So here we go. Look at our perfect block. I love it. And remember, you would also sew your hoop fabric on so that when you're stitching, you have a place for your fabric to be hooped. So let's open our pre-printed pattern, grab a pair of Karen K. Buckley scissors, and we are gonna simply trim and put these in place. And then we're gonna talk about stitch tips. So of course we give you an outline of what piece goes where. I'm just gonna look at the picture. So again, we're gonna trim pretty close to the designs because you don't need to have a ton of extra. And you can baste your designs in place, especially if you're taking this on a trip or maybe traveling around, taking it to a retreat. Just lightly basting this little pre-printed sticker, I think, is a good idea. You don't have to by any means. Now we are going to cut out this beautiful phrase. I love it. There we go. And by cutting a lot of the excess off, it's just less you have to dissolve. I love watching it dissolve. Isn't it cool, y'all, how it just disappears? It's like magic. I don't really understand how it works, to be honest, but thanks to Sulky for inventing Sulky Stick and Stitch so that all of us can get to enjoy all this art pre-printed. And now we're just gonna go around, trim close to the word May. There we go. All right, get my scraps out of the way. Now let's talk about putting these in place. So we have our girl. Oh, and I'm gonna show you some tips on putting your applique pieces in place as well. I'm gonna go on and do that. I like to applique after I've done all the stitching and dissolved it. If you wanted to do it before, you could, but I think it's better to do it after. And then our word May. So remember, you'd have your hoop fabric on, so you need to allot for that 1/4 inch when we put this in place. So I'm simply gonna peel my little girl. I'm gonna be brave and do her all at once. So remember, you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm gonna go a little more to the left and top. I would sew the hoop fabric on first before you put your sticker down. So do as I say, not as I do, I guess I should say. Then we're gonna put our little bird. It looks like he has a little comb over it. That's what I always think on him. Doo-doo. If I can get it pulled, there we go. And now put our little birdie centered nicely. So cute, don't you love it? And I must say the sticky solvy does get a little bit on your fingers when you're putting it in place, but just go wash your hands. And remember, we have a 1/4 inch seam allowance at the top here. So I'm gonna go a little bit more to the bottom of that block. And here you'll have that 1/4 inch seam down the left side and across the top. There we go. Oh my gosh, such a special quilt, don't you think? And then finally, we're gonna put the word May on. And then let's talk about some stitch tips. All right, and again, we have seam on the bottom and left, so we're going a little bit more to the top right. So now everything is put in place. We'd have someone email and ask, like, what if their sticky goes on to the next section of fabric? Don't worry, it's gonna dissolve, no one cares. All right, it's a very forgiving project. It looks like it's a lot of work. And don't get me wrong, it's a lot of stitching, but the blocks go together so quickly, it's really a lot of fun to do. I hope you're all enjoying it so much. I love the comments that y'all share with us. So now let's talk about stitch tips. I'm gonna start with her hair, and I am going to excuse the clunkiness, I'm gonna pull the actual quilt into view for you. So this is the quilt block. So let's talk Miss May. So on the girl, we've had a lot of questions about her hair, and it is a selection of lazy daisies throughout, right? And so the thread color that we use here is the, I believe it's the sun yellow. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's the 4044 butterscotch. So that's a really fun variegated thread. So that's how you end up with like this variegated look. I know a lot of you are matching the skin tone and the thread colors to your granddaughter or a niece or whoever it is you're making the quilt for, or family members. But the variegated thread is what we used here. And it just gives it a fun like look of like natural variations in her hair. And so that is a lazy daisy filling it in. So what your block looks like, you have the outline that you will back stitch, and then just have fun filling it in. You can make those little curls as tight or as loose as you want with the size of that lazy daisy stitch. And then of course, right across the top here is more of her hair, right? So you'll fill in with maybe the smaller lazy daisies right in there. Then on the flowers, again, as we always say, you can customize this with any of the thread colors that you've received and with any type of stitching that you like to do. These flowers are all filled in with a satin stitch, nice and easy to do. There are French knots coming off the ends of the little cute flower things poking out. Again, her eyes are French knots. We talked a couple videos ago about how many loops you go around the needle. Her eye, I would say this is a 1 or 2 loop. Look, I have sticky on me from the stabilizer. So that's a 1 or 2 loop, I would say, eyeball. But again, you can adjust it how you want. All of her skirt is filled in with just a back stitch. There's some French knots We have some satin fill in right here. And then the heart on her dress is a very small heart that's satin stitched and filled in. Then just basic back stitch around the edge. And then let's go over here to the word May. Let me pull it up just a little for you. So May, everything is a back stitch. You have some French knots as accents, and then portion of the flower is filled in. Let's take a look at what that flower looks like drawn. So let's see, simply the middle of each of the flower petals is satin stitched in. You could satin stitch all of them in. I think it would be really fun maybe to use another pink. You've had other pinks throughout leading up to May, and you could do a secondary pink color to fill in around the flower petals. I think that would be cute. This flower right here, I can tell is a variegated, I believe it goes with Miss February. And so that's a variegated here that's pulled in. It's really fun to customize the colors. I have to tell you right now, my aunt is making this entire quilt for her granddaughter, and it's been really fun to see how she is taking the same threads everybody gets, but she's just changing up the colors. Like on the words on February, she did most of them all pink instead of, I think there's yellow and pink and things like that in it. So you can customize this with all the beautiful thread colors because all thread colors that you get in your kit match the entire quilt. So you can have fun, pretend they're color crowns and you're coloring a quilt. Over here on the phrase, all very easy back stitching all the way. It looks like at the end of Mom might have put a French knot here when she was stitching. And then if you look at the end of the letters, or yeah, on she, the S and the E. So when there's that loop-de-loop, that little bit of thickness, Mom did a French knot. You don't have to by any means, but you certainly can. See at the end of G. So you have the ampersand or the and sign right here at the G around the word she. Doesn't look like any of the other letters have that, but you could certainly add it. I think it'd be cute to add some of those French knots at the end of like the G and the N, the D and the E of dance, W and S of watches, just to kind of make that flow. And then of course some satin stitching here on the flower and some French knots. Let's take a look at our little bug. Is this a dragonfly or a butterfly? This bug. It is just a collection of colors, and you can see there's dots drawn for you that you can accent with French knots. And again, you can go as crazy as you want with the thread colors. I think it's really fun. So just a back stitch and thread French knots here. And then on your bird, all back stitching. I love this. This bird to me looks like he has a comb over. I've thought that from the beginning when Lindsay drew it. Cracks me up that he has like, you know, how people don't want to admit they're going bald and they come over. That's what this little bird has to me. But again, you can make him any kind of fun colors that you want. And again, he has a little bit of satin stitching on his nose just to make that beak stand out because it's so small. A few French knots for accent. And then it looks like down here for the little feet, instead of doing just like tracing those lines, if you want to do 3 lazy daisies for each little foot, you could do that too. So I guess you could say this is the month of lazy daisies. So now the next thing we're going to do after you have it all stitched and dissolved is place our applique. So I'll do that in the video next for you. Okay, so now at this point you would be done with all of your stitching, your block would be dissolved, and you wouldn't have any of your sticky left. So your block would essentially be done except for the applique. So what I'm doing right now is putting my fabric, my block, directly over the placement guide that's in my pattern booklet. And what I have below me, oh look, I have my cutting mat out still. You don't want to iron on your cutting mat. You are going to have all of your pieces ready to go, and then you're going to use your light pad and your glass mat. Let me move this cutting mat out of the way. And underneath there, I have my glass mat that's directly on top of my light pad, and I can iron on this glass mat. So if you don't have one of these, I highly recommend it. We have them on our website. And so what we're going to do is put our placement guide back in place. And so you're going to use the lines. You're going to have your 1/4 inch seam will be on the outer edges, and these pieces line right up with your seams. So I am using a pin cushion as a weight to keep it in place. I think that makes it nice and easy. And then if you need to have a stiletto to put your pieces in place, this little Alex Anderson tool is great to have. So on the page right here, you have a sample of putting your pieces in place. You don't have to follow that exactly. I am going to just randomly start placing my pieces. So we're gonna do one. And all of the pieces are the exact same shape. So you don't have to worry. Oh, see, I'm hitting my placement guide. You gotta keep it in place the whole time. There we go. And I am just working my way over. And again, I'm doing it totally random, which I think is super fun. You can plan yours out, and you don't want to, yours of course will be totally complete and you won't have any of your sticky left. I'm gonna peel my sticky off though, so I don't accidentally hit it with the iron. Because if you hit it with the iron, it does make the sticky not work anymore. It melts it and then it won't dissolve. So no matter what part of the project you're on, don't iron that sticky. And then let's do, what color haven't we used? Let's do a solid purple. And what I'm doing is just going right down the line, ironing these in place. So now I'm going to finish making my little pieces. So let's do a solid here. And to me, by going down the row, because there's 6 and you have 6 colors, you know that you're getting a pretty even distribution of color. And that way you probably won't have 2 colors next to each other if you play your cards right, as they say. So it depends on how much you like scrappy. If you want to plan it out ahead of time. And you can see the point of this comes right up to the edge. And once I have these, like I'm just loosely ironing these right now. Once I have them in place, I will go back and do a final iron. There we go. And you can see I used this color twice right there. So I'm gonna put it over here just to get a good distribution of the color. Might as well do that with the yellow too. Let's go one here. There we go. And another yellow, let's say right here. There we go. Now let's continue on. Let's see, we have this lime hasn't been used up here. And so you can see your piece is gonna go right up to that seam, right next to your other piece, and then they all meet pretty much in the center. And then, have we done a purple dot? We have not. So let's do a purple dot here. And just point it to the center, point it to the edge. And let's do a pink. Loving this, it's looking cute, isn't it? So easy. Don't let any part of this quilt stress you out. Just have fun putting your pieces in place. So now let's do a purple here. We'll do another purple. Let's do one right here. And then how about one here? So now we've done all of our purples. Now we have our pinks to do. So let's see, let's go pink and pink. That's gonna look good, right? I think so. So we'll iron this one. And then get this little guy pointed the right way. There we go. And again, going right up to your seam. Now we have our lime green. And one more lime green down here. And then we just have 2 more of the purple dots to put in place. So easy. Now you can see the picture in the pattern. Mom stitched all of these with a white thread. So you want to use a 30 weight white thread in your needle and a matching thread in your bobbin. However, if you maybe don't applique a lot and don't have a 30 weight thread, don't worry. You can also just use a 50 weight thread in your needle, and that does just fine on the applique. The 30 weight does give it a little bit more oomph, if you will. Okay, so now we have all those pieces in place. Let's take a look. I'm gonna turn my light pad off. And what I'm gonna do now is grab my Steady Betty. We're gonna put this back in place. And what I'm gonna do is give it a final press. So see, I'm gonna have my seam allowance right here. and here. So if you want, you would maybe still have your hoop fabric on when you do this, and that way you don't have to worry about going into that seam allowance and accidentally moving your placement guide. But that's it. So I hope that these tips in the tutorial have helped out. As always, if you have any questions at all about a girl's life or any of our clubs, don't hesitate to visit stitchesoflovequilting.com, click on support, and you can submit a ticket. Go straight to Ariel and Kathy, and they are so helpful. And if they don't know the answers, they get us, but they do know the answers to pretty much everything. So if you have any questions, reach out to them. And thank you so much for being a member of A Girl's Life.